Let's begin here, because too many confuse the difference between attraction and caretaking. A woman who carries maturity within her often believes she must compensate. She tells herself it is her age, her looks, or the gap in years that creates the obstacle. But it is not time that dulls desire. It is the invisible shift when she begins to mother instead of stand as an equal. This shift is quiet, yet powerful enough to turn spark into indifference. A younger man may feel her warmth at first, but the moment she treats him as less than whole, he retreats. Not because of her age, but because her energy no longer calls him forward as a partner. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now think of the first moments when two people meet. The surface speaks of age, appearance, circumstance, yet beneath that lies the field of presence. Jung once observed that what we repress in ourselves appears in the faces of others. If a woman hides her own insecurity behind nervous jokes or constant advice, she awakens his role as the child, not the lover. Her persona, the mask she believes will protect her, betrays her deeper wish for connection. And what was once an invitation becomes a barrier. Consider the tension here. On one side, the myth that youth must be matched, that every wrinkle is a warning sign. On the other side, the truth that attraction is born not of years, but of authenticity. When she offers herself without apology, she carries a presence no younger rival can imitate. It is the difference between pretending to be carefree and truly resting in one's own skin. The first is a performance. The second is power. This is where the journey begins. To understand that what weakens desire is not age itself, but the hidden urge to prove, to control, to mother. And what deepens desire is a quiet acceptance of the self, the years, the lessons, the shadows, and light integrated. The woman who knows this does not compete. She does not explain. She stands, and in her standing, she invites. In this first part, we uncover the stage on which all later patterns will play. The setting is not a restaurant or a living room. The true stage is the psyche where the shadow whispers of fear and the persona tries to hide it. The looming tension is not his disinterest, but her own forgetting. For the task ahead is simple, though not easy, to return to her center and to discover that the key was never youth at all, but authenticity. There comes a moment in many connections where the energy shifts almost imperceptibly. What begins as lightness, curiosity, and possibility can suddenly feel heavy, defined by roles rather than mystery. A woman may not even notice when this shift occurs. She is speaking, laughing, perhaps even enjoying the glow of attention, and yet something inside her begins to move toward familiar ground. That ground is the role of caretaker. She asks questions with a hidden agenda, not to discover, but to guide. She hears his worries and responds with solutions, not silence. She senses his uncertainty and feels compelled to steady it, as though her worth is proven by her ability to manage his life. In that moment, attraction quietly gives way to hierarchy. He ceases to feel like a man beside her and begins to feel like a child beneath her. This is the first fracture subtle yet decisive. The flame does not extinguish because of years or wrinkles, but because of energy. The energy of maternal concern replaces the energy of equal desire. It is not malicious. It is not intentional. It is born of habit, of the shadow's whisper that says, "You must prove your usefulness to be loved." Jung once wrote that what remains unconscious rules us as fate. This is precisely what happens when a mature woman, without realizing it, lets the unconscious pattern of caretaking take the lead. She does not choose it consciously. She enacts it because the role of mother, helper, or rescuer has been rehearsed so many times that it feels natural. And yet, what feels natural to her is often suffocating to him. Consider how quickly such a pattern unfolds. A man shares a small frustration with his work. Rather than listening with openness, she immediately prescribes the solution. He suggests a spontaneous outing, and she responds with cautious reminders of why it may not work. In each moment, she believes she is offering wisdom, stability, love. But what he receives is correction, protection, and ultimately, control. Here lies the paradox. The very qualities that once carried her through family life, problem solving, advising, managing, now become obstacles in the realm of romance. They are admirable in their own right, yet misplaced in this context. For intimacy to thrive, a woman must stand beside, not above. She must reveal her being, not prove her competence. When she forgets this, the younger man feels his role change. He no longer experiences himself as a partner who can bring something valuable to her life. Instead, he becomes the recipient of her endless knowledge and unsolicited guidance. Attraction is replaced by obligation. His energy shifts inward toward the role of son rather than lover. This is the invisible fracture that many never see until the bond has cooled. And once this fracture has occurred, it is difficult to reverse because the unconscious pattern carries with it years of reinforcement. She has mothered children, managed households, sustained careers. To step out of that mode feels almost unsafe, as though she risks losing control of the very thing that ensures stability. But the truth is different. In love, stability is not born of control. It is born of mutual respect, of space, for spontaneity, of the freedom to stumble together rather than to be guided by one alone. A younger man does not seek a supervisor or a teacher. He seeks a partner who can meet him at eye level, even if their years are different. Let us pause here because this moment of fracture is not merely a social misstep. It is symbolic of a deeper psychic pattern. Jung would call it the conflict between persona and shadow. The persona. The mask of competence says, I must guide, I must manage, I must lead. The shadow hidden beneath whispers of fear. If I do not prove my worth, I will be abandoned. And so the woman acts from persona. But it is the shadow that drives her. The younger man senses this without needing to analyze it. He feels that he is not trusted to stand on his own. He feels that she needs to hold the reins in order to feel safe. And for him, attraction requires risk, play, a sense of discovery. When every moment is already mapped out, when every uncertainty is pre-answered, the sense of possibility withers. It is here that chemistry turns into comfort, but not the kind of comfort that deepens intimacy. Rather, it becomes the comfort of a golden cage. He is cared for, perhaps even admired, but not desired. He is guided, but not invited. He is respected as a learner, but not recognized as a man. And so the tension fades quietly until he steps away. Why does this happen so often? Because the unconscious habit of caretaking is deeply ingrained. It is the role many women were told to play from youth. To be useful, to be selfless, to nurture endlessly. These were praised as virtues. But when carried into romance, they become barriers. They turn relationships into classrooms or families, but not living encounters between equals. This is the fracture that sets the stage for transformation. For unless it is seen, the pattern will repeat. A woman will find herself again and again in situations where the spark fades, not knowing why. She may blame age or appearance or circumstance. Yet the truth lies within. The fracture comes not from the outside, but from the inside. It is the shadow seeking validation through control. And so the first step is not to accuse or to regret, but to notice. To notice the moment she slips into the role of guide. To notice the impulse to manage rather than to listen. To notice the urge to fill silence with lessons rather than to allow space for discovery. For in these small choices, the fracture begins, and in their awareness, the healing can begin as well. Think of it in symbolic terms. Imagine two paths. One is paved, straight, predictable. It leads exactly where you expect, and every stone is already laid down. That is the path of control, of advice, of caretaking. The other path is winding, uncertain, filled with turns and surprises. That is the path of attraction, of adventure, of shared becoming. When she chooses the first path, the journey ends before it begins. When she dares the second, the story unfolds with life. The younger man seeks not perfection, but presence. He seeks not certainty, but connection. He seeks a woman who can stand in her years without using them as a shield or a weapon. He does not need her guidance at every step. He needs her trust, her openness, her willingness to let him be a man, even if he stumbles. This is the lesson of the first fracture, that attraction dies not because of age, but because of the unconscious return to roles that no longer serve. The shadow seeks to prove, and in proving, it kills desire. But when the shadow is seen, when the pattern is named, the possibility of change arises, and with it, the possibility of true connection. For individuation, the process of becoming whole requires that we integrate these old roles rather than remain captive to them. The mother within is not to be denied, but to be honored in her rightful place. She belongs in the realm of children, not in the realm of lovers. When she appears where she does not belong, imbalance follows. But when she is acknowledged and set aside, the woman can step fully into her own presence as partner, as equal as self. This is where the path begins to bend toward awakening. For only by recognizing the fracture can one begin to heal it. Only by seeing the shadow can one choose differently, and only by releasing the urge to mother can the woman discover the depth of her own magnetism, which was never about care, but always about presence. The fracture of attraction does not end with the moment of caretaking. It ripples into deeper patterns that shape how a woman presents herself, often without realizing what she is doing. She begins to wear a mask, a persona crafted to protect her from the fear of rejection. This mask may look polished and appealing on the surface, but it conceals the unease beneath. The persona says, I must show myself as younger, livelier, more accomplished, more available. It whispers that if she can outshine her years, she will hold his gaze. Yet behind this polished exterior lives the shadow, the part of her that believes she is not enough as she is. The shadow carries the wound of comparison, the dread of being overlooked, the secret terror that her value has an expiration date. This tension between mask and shadow is exhausting. She invests time, money, and effort to appear younger than her truth. She tries to compete with women half her age by imitating their styles, their rhythms, their restless energy. She believes that if she can erase the years, she will erase the distance. But the paradox is cruel. In trying to hide what is real, she loses the very qualities that make her radiant. Attraction, after all, is not born of mimicry. It arises from authenticity. When she becomes a copy of someone younger, she forgets that the essence of her allure is precisely what cannot be imitated: her lived depth, her seasoned presence, her self-possession. A mask may impress for a moment, but masks grow heavy, and eventually both she and he feel the falseness. Another form of the persona shows itself not in appearance, but in achievement. She may try to prove her worth by displaying her career, her stability, her financial independence. She lists her successes as though they are credentials in an interview. Yet relationships are not interviews. They are living encounters of soul to soul. Accomplishments may inspire respect, but they do not ignite desire. And when every conversation becomes a resume, he no longer feels the spark of connection. The shadow deepens this cycle. It whispers, you must justify your presence. You must convince him you belong here. So, she overcompensates. She is always available, answering messages immediately, canceling her own plans to fit his. She floods him with praise, eager to reassure, desperate not to lose ground. But this constant availability does not communicate love. It communicates lack. Instead of being drawn to her, he begins to feel crowded, as though he has conquered her without even trying. The more she gives from a place of fear, the less he values what he receives. The shadow feeds on this pattern, confirming its prophecy. See, you are not enough. You must do more. And so she doubles her effort, blind to the fact that effort itself has become the barrier. Attraction is not a harvest of labor. It is a current that flows most freely when it is not forced. In Jungian language, the persona is the mask we create to navigate society, to earn approval, to feel safe. It is necessary, but when mistaken for the self, it becomes suffocating. The shadow is everything we fear to admit: the insecurity, the jealousy, the secret shame about aging, the hidden resentment toward time itself. When these forces dominate, the woman's relationships become a stage play where she is no longer free. The cost is heavy. She loses spontaneity, that spark of unpredictability that keeps connection alive. Every answer becomes rehearsed, every gesture calculated, every silence filled with anxious proof of value. He may smile politely, but inwardly he senses the control. He senses that she is not with him as an equal soul, but as an actress playing a part. The mystery evaporates, and with it, the magnetism. Think of it symbolically. The persona is like a painted mask at a masquerade, beautiful, perhaps even dazzling under the lights. But when worn too long, the mask cracks, and beneath it lies exhaustion. The shadow is the mirror she avoids the reflection she fears to see. Yet it is only by facing that reflection that she can put down the mask. There is also the danger of excessive seriousness. Believing that maturity must always appear responsible and composed, she suppresses her playful side. She forgets laughter, forgets spontaneity, forgets the joy of being simply alive in the moment. The persona insists that seriousness equals respect. But the younger man, already surrounded by responsibility in work and life, longs for someone who can bring vitality without artifice. He does not need another manager. He seeks a partner whose wisdom carries lightness, not weight. Here we see the true battle. It is not between youth and age. It is between authenticity and pretense, between living from the self and living from fear. The shadow thrives when she believes she must compete, must hide, must overcompensate. The persona then performs the competition, hides the doubt, and overcompensates in action. Together they form a cycle that suffocates intimacy. And yet within this struggle lies the seed of transformation. Jung taught that individuation begins when we recognize the difference between the mask and the true self. The mask will always be there, but it is not the whole story. The shadow will always whisper, but it does not hold the final word. When a woman sees these forces at play within herself, she begins to reclaim her freedom. The great irony is that what she fears will repel her real age, her unpolished presence, her true emotional depth is what holds the greatest magnetism. A man may admire her accomplishments, but it is her authenticity that captivates. He may notice her appearance, but it is her vitality that holds him. He may appreciate her wisdom, but it is her willingness to share without control that bonds him. So long as she wears the mask, she denies herself this power. She becomes trapped in performance, trying to perfect what does not need perfection. But when she dares to let the mask slip, even for a moment, something profound happens. He meets her, not her persona, and she meets herself, not her shadow's fear. This is the hidden cost of ignoring the shadow and mistaking the persona for truth, the loss of authenticity, the loss of presence, the loss of connection. But the moment she begins to see the story can change. The path toward awakening lies just beyond this recognition. Awakening begins when the woman realizes she has been fighting a battle against herself. The years she tried to conceal the wrinkles, she sought to erase the silence she filled with proof, none of these were her true enemy. What weakens her presence is not age itself, but the refusal to accept it. The moment she stops apologizing for who she is, a new energy enters the room. Picture the difference. When asked her age, she does not shrink or deflect. She answers with ease as though she were speaking of the weather. She may even speak of her life with quiet pride, as if each year were a chapter in a book worth reading. In that simple act, the tension breaks. He no longer feels her fear, but instead senses her rootedness. She is not asking for permission to be desired. She is simply standing in her truth. This is the essence of awakening the shift from proving to being. Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming who we are not who we imagine we should be. In this light, every wrinkle is not a flaw, but a record of existence. Every scar is not a disqualification, but a testament. Every experience becomes part of the wholeness she now embodies. When she embraces this, something magnetic happens. A younger man is no longer faced with a performance or a mask. He is faced with presence. Presence has nothing to do with youth. Presence is the quiet confidence that flows when a person accepts themselves fully. This is why authenticity feels irresistible. It radiates a stability no mask can produce. Awakening is not a single moment, but a series of small choices. She notices when she begins to offer advice unasked and chooses instead to listen. She catches herself apologizing for her age and chooses instead to smile with grace. She resists the impulse to prove her worth through stories of success and chooses instead to share her being without justification. Each choice is small, but together they create an entirely different energy. In symbolic language, this is the act of setting down the mask. The persona carefully crafted for approval no longer needs to lead. The shadow full of doubt and fear no longer dictates from the dark. Instead, the self steps forward, the integrated core of who she is. Both light and shadow held in balance. She becomes more real. And in becoming real, she becomes radiant. Consider how this feels from the other side. A younger man senses her ease. He notices that she does not need to compete with younger women, nor does she try to. He sees that she does not disguise her years, but wears them as a garment of truth. Instead of trying to inspire him, she lives inspired. Instead of trying to control the story, she allows the story to unfold. This is not weakness. It is strength of a different order, the strength of being. Awakening also means reclaiming play. When the fear of age fades, seriousness softens. She remembers laughter, the spark of spontaneity, the joy of shared discovery. These qualities are not at odds with maturity. They are expressions of it. To laugh with freedom, one must first release the burden of constant self-defense. To be playful with grace, one must trust that dignity is not fragile. In this way, awakening is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who she was before fear took over. It is the return to vitality, not the vitality of youth, but the vitality of wholeness. This vitality does not apologize. It does not grasp. It does not plead. It simply lives, and in living it attracts. Jung taught that what we resist persists, but what we accept transforms. By resisting her years, she only deepened her insecurity. By accepting them, she transforms her energy. The same features she once believed disqualified her, now become her signature. The same stories she once tried to hide become her magnetism. The very difference she feared becomes the gift she alone can bring. Notice how the polarity shifts. Before awakening, she asks, "How can I hold his attention?" After awakening, she asks, "Do I enjoy being here?" Before awakening, she scans herself for flaws. After awakening, she carries herself as whole. Before awakening, she lives in reaction to his gaze. After awakening, she lives in alignment with herself. This change is quiet but unmistakable. Awakening is also an act of release. She releases the urge to be endlessly available. She releases the compulsion to answer every message instantly, to rearrange her life around his attention. In this release, she regains her rhythm. She has her own interests, her own friendships, her own pulse of life. And it is this independence, this fullness that draws him closer. Not because she withholds, but because she radiates wholeness. Here, the alchemy becomes clear. The shadow once hidden is no longer feared. The persona once rigid is no longer needed. In their place, the self emerges not as a role, but as a presence. The woman no longer tries to be timeless. She becomes timeless because she is fully herself. This is the pivot of the story. The fracture has been seen, the mask has been named, and the possibility of a different way opens. No longer enslaved to competition with youth, she embraces her own archetype, the wise woman, the lover, the self in her fullness. In Jungian terms, this is the movement toward individuation. In everyday terms, it is the return to authenticity. And so awakening does not require dramatic gestures or perfect words. It requires only the courage to inhabit one's own skin without apology. That courage is magnetic. It says to the world, "I am whole as I am." It says to him, "I do not need you to complete me, but I welcome you to walk beside me." And it says to herself, "I no longer fear time, for I have learned to live within it." This is the gift of awakening. It is the shift from insecurity to acceptance, from proving to being, from mask to presence. It is the realization that age is not an obstacle, but a language of depth, of resilience, of truth. When spoken without shame, that language resonates more powerfully than any performance. Awakening is never complete without action. Awareness alone is a seed, but it must be planted in the soil of choice to bear fruit. A woman who has seen the mask for what it is must now decide how she will live without it. This is the place where energy shifts from theory into practice, from inner realization into outer behavior. The transformation begins quietly with boundaries. She no longer explains herself endlessly or rushes to reassure. She no longer offers advice as a way of proving her usefulness. Instead, she chooses presence. She chooses to stand where she is unhidden and let her life speak for itself. This act is not defiance, but alignment. It is the outward expression of the self that has been waiting to lead. Consider how this boundary feels. Before, she was quick to cancel her own plans to fit into his. She answered his messages at once, as though her value depended on constant readiness. She said yes too easily, fearing that no would mean loss. But now, she pauses. She allows herself to respond in her own rhythm. She keeps commitments to herself with the same seriousness she once gave to others. And in this simple act, she discovers something profound. Respect follows self-respect. Jung observed that we do not become whole by chasing light, but by making the darkness conscious. Here, the darkness was the fear of abandonment, the fear of being overlooked, the fear that without proving, she would not be chosen. By bringing this fear into awareness, she no longer acts from it. Instead, she sets standards, not demands. Standards arise from clarity of being. Demands arise from fear of losing. The difference is felt immediately, both by her and by him. Boundaries are not walls. They are the lines that define a life of integrity. When she no longer agrees to last-minute requests that disrespect her time, she communicates without words, "My life has value." When she does not accept crumbs of attention, she communicates, "My presence deserves reciprocity." These are not battles, but choices. Each boundary is a quiet declaration of worth. Symbolically, this stage is like stepping out of a crowded room into fresh air. The persona once tried to keep her safe by making her agreeable. The shadow once kept her anxious by whispering that she was replaceable. But now, she steps beyond both. She breathes differently. She no longer acts from fear of losing, but from certainty of being. And this certainty creates an energy that cannot be faked. From his perspective, the change is striking. He notices that her attention is no longer automatic. It must be earned. He realizes that her time is not infinite, but chosen. He begins to feel the weight of her presence as something rare, not something guaranteed. This does not push him away. It draws him in. For attraction thrives in the space where choice exists. Here lies the paradox. When she no longer chases, she is pursued. When she no longer explains, she is understood. When she no longer tries to hold him, he holds her more tightly. This is not manipulation. It is the natural response to energy that is whole within itself. The self does not beg, it radiates. The self does not prove, it simply is. Boundaries also extend inward. She no longer tolerates the voice within that calls her less than. She no longer indulges the comparisons that rob her of peace. When the shadow tries to pull her back into fear, she acknowledges it, but does not obey. She says inwardly, "Yes, I feel the old fear, but I choose presence instead." In this moment, she integrates what once controlled her. She does not need to destroy the shadow, only to see it clearly and choose otherwise. Every transformation must pass through the test of practice. She may feel the pull to return to old habits, to mother, to over-explain, to prove her relevance. But each time, she notices she has another chance to choose differently. And each choice reinforces her new rhythm. With time, what once felt forced becomes natural. What once was fear becomes freedom. Think of the symbolism here. A boundary is like a door. In the past, the door was always open, and anyone could enter without knocking. Now, the door is still open, but only by invitation. This does not make her cold or distant. It makes her intentional. Those who are welcomed feel the difference. They sense they have been chosen, not simply accepted out of fear. And in that choosing, desire grows. Jung spoke of individuation as the journey toward the self, the movement away from roles imposed by others and toward the truth of one's own being. Setting boundaries is an essential step in this journey. It is the moment she ceases to live for validation and begins to live from her core. In love, this does not diminish intimacy, it deepens it. For intimacy cannot exist without freedom, and freedom cannot exist without boundaries. Transformation also shows itself in how she carries her silence. Before, silence was filled with nervous explanations or endless words meant to hold attention. Now, silence becomes part of her power. She does not fear it. She rests in it. He may sit beside her and feel the calm of someone who does not need to perform. This silence is magnetic because it communicates trust in life itself. The choice to live authentically is not a one-time act. It is renewed each day in the small gestures of self-respect. It is renewed in the way she responds to attention with openness, but not desperation. It is renewed in the way she walks into a room, not seeking approval, but bringing presence. And it is renewed in the way she looks at herself, not through comparison, but through acceptance. This is the transformation that makes her unforgettable. She is no longer the woman who explains her worth. She is the woman whose worth is felt. She is no longer the woman who fears being left behind. She is the woman whose presence others seek out. She is no longer the woman who lives in reaction to age. She is the woman who inhabits her years with grace. Boundaries are not about shutting others out. They are about letting the right energy in. By setting them, she reclaims her life as her own. By living them, she communicates without words that she knows her value. And this is what changes everything. In the end, transformation is simple, though not easy. It is the daily choice to live from presence rather than fear, to act from standards rather than demands, to invite rather than to chase. Each time she does, she steps more fully into the self. And in doing so, she discovers that the very boundaries she once feared to set are the ones that make love possible. Every journey must end where it began, in the heart of the self. We have walked through the fractures, the masks, the awakening, and the transformation. What remains now is the lesson that ties it all together. Authenticity is the rarest and most irresistible quality a person can offer. It was never about competing with youth. It was never about outshining others with beauty, success, or availability. These were distractions created by the persona, the mask built to win approval, to shield against fear, to disguise the whisper of the shadow. But masks always slip, and fear always leaks through. In the end, what endures is presence. A younger man, like anyone drawn to another, is not captivated by perfection. He is drawn to the way someone inhabits their own existence. He feels the difference between a woman trying to impress and a woman at peace with herself. One requires constant performance. The other radiates quiet magnetism. One drains, the other nourishes. This is why individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, is so essential. When she accepts her age, her history, her scars, she accepts herself. No longer divided between the image she presents and the truth she feels, she becomes integrated. And integration is powerful because it communicates authenticity without a word. Think of it in symbols. The mask belongs to the persona, polished but fragile. The whisper belongs to the shadow, fearful yet persistent. But when both are brought into the light, they no longer rule. What emerges is the self, the center of being that is neither role nor disguise, but truth. From that center flows presence, and presence cannot be imitated. This is why the women who seem most unforgettable are often those who try the least. They are not performing, they are living. They are not chasing, they are choosing. They are not apologizing for who they are embodying it. Such energy is rare. In a world filled with roles and performances, and this rarity is what creates lasting magnetism. It is not her age that matters, but how she carries her years. It is not her appearance that defines her, but the vitality of her presence. It is not her achievements that secure love, but the depth of her being. A woman who has embraced this truth no longer fears time, for she has learned to live within it fully. And so, we come to the lesson that applies to us all. Love, respect, and desire cannot be sustained by masks. They are sustained by authenticity, by the courage to live without apology, by the willingness to stand whole in both light and shadow. When we stop trying to prove our value and begin to live from it, relationships shift. They move from effort to flow, from control to connection, from fear to presence. The greatest irony is that what we once believed to be flaws often become our greatest assets when embraced. The lines on the face become the record of laughter and survival. The years become chapters of wisdom. The differences we feared would separate us become the very qualities that make us unforgettable. This is the deeper Jungian truth. Individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. To integrate the shadow, to release the persona, to live from the self, this is the path. And when you walk it, you discover that what you thought disqualified you is what sets you apart. So, let us end here in the stillness of this realization. Authenticity is not something you need to create. It is what remains when you stop pretending. It is the soul's quiet magnetism, the light that does not flicker because it is not fueled by approval. If you carry one truth with you, let it be this: what attracts, what endures, what inspires is not youth or perfection, but authenticity. It is the presence of someone who has lived, integrated, and accepted themselves fully. That presence cannot be imitated, and it cannot be ignored. Thank you for reflecting with me in this journey. Before you go, I invite you to share in the comments what part of this reflection spoke to you most. Your insights may be the very words another listener needs tonight.